All right. So my name is Walisha Wilson, and I am interviewing you today for my Represent Justice project, as well as All of Us Are None for the End Slavery in Georgia campaign. I just wanted you to be able to state your name, how you would want it to appear across the screen, and your title. So some folks have put community leader, some people have put formerly incarcerated entrepreneur, law student, however you want it to be said across the screen and your location. So Atlanta, East Point, whatever, however you want to do it.
All right. My name is Luci Harrell. I'm an organizer in Atlanta.
Yeah, spell Lucy and then spell Harrell.
Okay, Luci, Luci, Harrell, Harrell. I use she, her pronouns. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, and I am an organizer and a formerly incarcerated person. Let's say I'm a law student who was formerly incarcerated, who actually started law school while incarcerated.
Okay.
So switching gears.
Switching gears. Okay. So I just have about 5 or 6 questions I want to ask you, and anything you want to feel free to expound on and clarify, because we want to make sure that folks, the whole purpose of this is at some point to get a commercial with it, for it to be out on all the social medias. And so we want to make sure that it's getting the point across. We don't want anybody to look at it and be like, so we really should maybe just not do that, because I know a lot of people have been focusing on paying people. I haven't been focused on that because I figure you might change the law now, because HB 1050 is supposed to be on the floor next year. And I think Rebecca Mitchell says it got shot down. But I don't want it to be like, okay, let's pay people a livable wage, and then next year we'll change the law. So I figure that's just too easy, as opposed to just saying if you do something final, like changing the Georgia law, that, you know, that's the plan B. So I know a lot of folks have been reading into it that I just rather you pay them, which they should be paid anyway. So that has been asking the question. So if you in the Georgia law, what are they going to be doing? They just sitting around, not doing anything, that kind of stuff. So whatever is going to be good, that when somebody see when you're saying it, they can say, okay, slavery is wrong on any type of level. This is what's going on. Black folks, white folks, women, men, people are forced. Because a lot of people think, well, they get out there, they volunteer. I said, who wouldn't volunteer to get out of a 6x8 cell? I mean, they want to get out and breathe some fresh air, probably see if they can bum some cigarettes and speak to other people. That doesn't mean they want to do it, you know, and people are actually retaliated against when they choose to do that. So I want folks to be able to have a clear picture of it.
Sounds good.
Okay, so I know that you are aware that slavery is still legal through the exception of the 13th Amendment. How has this loophole impacted you as a formerly incarcerated person? Have you ever had to work in prison? And if so,
Yes.
what type of duties did you have to do in condition?
Yeah, I probably worked for 8 years of my incarceration without getting paid a penny. You know, and that was while I was having to pay other things. Student loans, for one. We're not going to even go to the point of talking about how people have to pay things but aren't allowed to make money. That is just
The financial obligations. People think when you get incarcerated, your financial obligations stop, but you don't. You still have bills you have to pay.
That's right. You know, the IRS, Walisha, even has something on their website that makes a notation that just because a person is incarcerated does not exempt them from paying federal taxes, federal income taxes, if they qualify to pay them. And the Department of Education has a notice on their site that lets people know that they don't get an automatic deferment just because they're incarcerated and not making money from paying those student loan payments. So I want people to be full well aware that we have federal regulations that make sure we're still paying on things that we owe on, even while we're in carceral systems, slavery systems in the state that don't allow us to make money.
So how are people So how are folks expected to pay off child support, student loans, taxes owed while incarcerated, but they're not getting paid or not allowed the opportunities to make money while incarcerated?
That's a very good question. You know, slavery drives people, families, communities into poverty, and that's exactly how.
God, I didn't know that. Gee,
and as you know, that's not even to mention all the things that we have as necessities while we're incarcerated. having to pay to have basic communication with our families. California just passed a bill where they can get some free phone calls now.
Yes.
Why aren't we doing that in Georgia?
Yes.
Well,
And that's one of the things we're going to be adding on All of Us Anon's
yeah.
goals.
Yes. I mean, why aren't we doing that in Georgia? Well, that's because in Georgia, the Department of Corrections, a state agency, has a partnership agreement with one company. Even though Georgia has an anti-monopoly clause, this happens a lot in the carceral system where they have a partnership with this one company that provides phone services for people who are inside to have that vital connection with their families. Yet it costs us money.
So again, it's about profit, about making money.
That's right. Isn't that what slavery is about, Walisha? Profits?
It is, and
Yep.
why Georgia's been holding on to it for so long, because I imagine the amount of money they would lose. So many products in Georgia are made by incarcerated people, from license plates to lingerie to furniture to
Everything.
fast food items to military gear.
And our state's economy is entrenched in it. We are just. This is
So
something
what would you say to people who say that working incarcerated people for free labor benefits the community? What would be your opposing question to say, no, it doesn't? This is how it hurts the community and the economy.
I think that working people for free benefits some people in the community, right? The people who have financial stakes in those markets are the people who benefit. And unfortunately, as a state, we have a lot of financial ties. Our economy has a lot of financial partnerships that have been created based upon free labor of folks who are, forced to work. But, when you start to think about it from an economic perspective, that really puts tension on the concept of a free market, right? We want to, like, I say we, but, the vast majority of people want to live in a capitalist free labor market where competition drives the market. But yet we're putting these barriers up that prevent those free market mechanisms from working the way that they were intended to. So I don't know. I don't know why people are okay with that. I guess my only answer is that most people in Georgia are middle class, lower middle class, working folks, and they pay their taxes and they just don't really know where those taxes go.
That's awful. The next question is, as a white person who has been subjected to slavery, because a lot of people think that slavery is only about Black folks, what do you say to others who deny that prison labor it shouldn't even be called slavery? And for those who minimize it by saying, well, prison slave and labor is good for the community, it teaches incarcerated people skills? Or what do you say to those who say, I don't have a problem with it because if a person does a crime, they should do the time?
That's a lot. That's a lot of questions. Well,
okay, so I'm gonna break it down. So as a white person, what do you say to people who even deny that slavery, prison, they correlate slavery with prison labor?
Well, I will say this. I can understand how some people, especially Black folks, are apprehensive to call what's going on right now slavery, because to them it is not, and to everybody, it is definitely not equivalent to what slavery was in the South, prior to the mid-19th century. That is something different. But we call it slavery because the definition of that word is exactly what's going on. So I think when people, I think that some people do have apprehensions because they want to make the distinction that this is not, Black folks being brought to America against their will and held by people who exerted, ownership over them. But at the same time, we are property of the state and we are forced to work without having the capacity to really say no to that in any meaningful way. So that by definition is slavery.
Is slavery. Thank you for that. So what do you say for those who say prison slave labor is good for the community because it teaches incarcerated people skills, or they don't have a problem with it because if you do the crime, they should do the time?
Well, I will give you my personal experience, and I am telling you this understanding that it is a white privileged experience. I went to college over a decade before I was ever criminalized and sent to prison, and I had an ample skill set within my professional field. I worked my whole life. I didn't need to do manual labor for somebody for free as some kind of benefit to me later. It was only a strain and a toll on my aging health, and was in no way, shape, or form beneficial to me. And when I would say that to people in the prison, they would say, like, well, Lucy, you're an exception. But you know what, Walisha? Like, I look at the statistics and I'm not an exception. The vast majority of people in Georgia have a high school diploma, and most of those people worked in some capacity before they went to prison. So to say that something good is happening by teaching people, how to do this menial manual labor that breaks their backs and like causes the onset of cancer and mesothelioma and all these other conditions is just absurd.
Yeah,
Who
I mean, I
needs
had a
that?
master's degree when I went in. So, I mean, they expected me to work, but because I had a disability, even during the disability, but it's
Yeah.
like, can you tell me again how me cooking and messing my hands up, or how me taking out trash, or me dumping somebody's bloody pads and tampons, or me working on the side of the road is going to help me with my career? Because my career is professional. I don't know what you're talking about. So
That's
tell me how
right.
I'm gonna do this.
That's right. You know what it did help for me though, Walisha? To be made to work manual labor with no pay and treated as less than a human for so many years. It really helped inform my future career in criminal law, okay?
Exactly. That's what
Because my
motivated you to become a
goal
lawyer.
is to fight those criminal systems. They are criminal systems, and we have to acknowledge how and why. And so, you know, um, I I can say that I did glean that from my prison
So
experience.
tell us about the fact, and since you touched on it, I know you're the first person, not just in Georgia, but in the nation, to apply to law school or get accepted into law school. Explain that to me, what that is, so everybody will know who Luci Harrell is and what her accomplishment is.
I mean, we think so because there aren't any, we haven't been able to find any other instances of people doing that. It's really something that happened as a fluke. It wasn't that I gained permission from the Department of Corrections to go to law school. I actually sought permission. I actually got accepted to some law schools in the academic year before I started going. The reason that I was able to start going was just ironically because of the pandemic. The pandemic happened, and for the first time ever, the American Bar Association gave variants to law schools where they allowed them to do some online programming, which was never allowed before. All law schools had to do in-person programming. So that's how that came about.
Okay.
It was pure like this silver lining thing that happened while I was, living in
Yeah.
this overcrowded facility during
So
COVID.
you're the first person in Georgia history or throughout the nation to be accepted into law school while still incarcerated?
We can say we think so. I would love to find out that somebody did it before me. Love to. I really want to. Always trying to find people to talk to who've been through the same things as me, just like all of us.
Okay, that's awesome. Congrats. That's a big
Thank
achievement.
you.
And it really puts it in, it drives it home where people feel like folks in prison are the worst. That's where they belong. That's what they deserve. And you're like, no, there's a lot of talent behind prison walls. You have lawyers there, you
Absolutely.
have doctors there, you have people who have the potential to be so much if given the opportunity. And when you're inside, and whatever confidence that you had going in, a lot of times when you're having to work these menial jobs for free in the sun, and all you get is a molded bologna sandwich and a brown apple, barely any water to drink, or whatever you give a 6-year-old child, that doesn't help it at all.
That's right. That's right.
Ugh.
And people know that. It sucks. We always want to be treated like human. I'm sorry, this is a little bit of a tangent, but we want to be treated as humans. We want to be treated equally because we are. And I think sometimes we forget to think of people who get stuck in the correctional system. I mean, by as employees, as that too. Like I'm always trying to think of those people as individual human beings too. And I've had a lot of experience where there were people there who just said like, man, you should be doing this, or who really supported me trying to go to law school. But then like, you're fighting those things as systems, just like
Yeah.
the whole slavery thing. You're fighting it as a system. Like, this is the way it's set up. This is how many decades it's been entrenched in our state economy. So like, even if you find individual people who like get it and they want to have that conversation with you, it takes more and more people coming on board to overthrow that system, to put something else in its place.
What do you think that would mean for the state of Georgia to say, we don't support slavery, to be able to end this exception that's in the Georgia state law?
I mean, I think that it would take intense, conversations over probably a longer period of time than we want to wait, honestly. But people are going to have to reconfigure the entire state budget and all these partnerships that exist, with the DOC, and that's relied upon. That stuff goes to the budget. That budget is relied upon. I always read the highlights of the governor's proposed budgets when they come out. And one of the things that I noticed last year was that they actually put as a price cut in the governor's budget the increase in commissary costs, inflation in the prison. And this is before this inflation started happening that we have right now in our society. So that went up even more in the second year. So this stuff came in the middle of the pandemic. Obviously, the state, because it's free labor force, is not able to go out as much as it used to be now because of COVID. And we can talk a little bit more about that. It should have been restricted a lot more than it was. And we know that communities, the spread of COVID was just,
Devastating.
exacerbated because of how the DOC treated it and how they made people still go out into the communities. But besides that, we do know that our state took a hit with that free labor and cheap labor not being available as it was, and just to turn around and feed that cost back to the individuals and families who are already paying while they are disallowed,
already struggling. And you would think the state of Georgia, so it seems like one of the priorities would be for Georgia at some point to put people over profits. But you would think that once the pandemic should have been proof enough to say, you know what, we can see how hard, just like what's going on in Alabama with the folks over there on strike. At some point, you've got to not necessarily always put profits over people, but you've got to see and understand we get a lot of money coming into this state from the work that incarcerated people do. If every person in every prison and jail decided to stop working, and I fully support that if that's what they did, because sometimes you have to hit people in their pockets for them to get their minds right. But what they should be doing is saying we need to learn from this and start paying our folks, treating them much better, because we don't need them to be shutting down and saying what they're not going to do, because at some point even a dog will get tired of you kicking them down. And so it seems that the priority would be for Georgia, for one, to get out of this whole thing of profits. And that's probably why they still hold on to slavery. They're still holding on because they make, I just in Columbus alone, Columbus is one of the largest cities, one of the cities that makes the most off of incarcerated labor. They make over $2 million a year off of it. And there are 51, I found out last week, there are 51 municipalities in the state of Georgia who use incarcerated people as firefighters. People who put their lives on the line to save other folks in their houses from burning and saving their lives. But when they don't get paid a dime, a penny. But then when they get out and say, hey, I've been doing this as a firefighter for 1.5 2 years. I've even got the side of my face burned, whatever. I want to apply for your job at your fire department. Oh, sorry, you got a felony. So it's only good enough. You're only good enough and worth it to us for free, but we're not worth it for you to get the check.
We have that going on in our education business too.
Really?
Not really with the private schools, but some of these, University System of Georgia schools, UGA for one, I can say, backed and supported some independent classes inside the prison a few years ago, and then I know somebody very close to me applied, who had been in one of those classes, applied to UGA and was rejected as a
So
student.
you're good enough when you're not around us, not
Yeah.
in our backyard type stuff.
Yep.
That's awful.
It's awful. I mean, the rationale, there is no rationale. Claiming public safety when you have the highest sexual violence rate of a school in the Southeast, and then it's done by people who don't have any kind of criminal record. There's
Exactly.
no
Who ain't been
rationale.
caught yet. Who hadn't been caught yet.
I mean, so yeah, I mean, but the labor thing, I mean, it's a problem. It's a real problem. And I think I just keep going back to it being just like so embedded in our state economy. But the other thing, you were talking about something at the beginning there, Walisha, that I wanted to talk about. You know, prison is a business. It's a business.
Yes.
Whether it pays people or not, it is a booming business in this country. And if people wanted to get smart about morale inside of these horrid facilities, they would think about that in the ways that some of the most profitable corporations in America have started thinking about that, where they have people come in and offer, therapy, psychological, services, mental health, group, support systems within corporations. Google was one of the first corporations that realized, hey, sometimes we have people working for us who have kids that they can't leave at home. Let's have a daycare within this multi-billion-dollar complex that we have, so folks can bring their kids and have free daycare. Some companies now pay for childcare and things that people need, looking at employees as the whole person. If the prison business just took a little bit of the cue from that part of corporate America as to how they treat people who are working for them, then we could change the climate right there.
Golly. We need to get a podcast. I mean, I'm serious. I think a lot of the stuff that you're saying, people don't know. I think a lot of people don't know. And I think those who do know don't care because they have a financial stake in it.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got to get, Georgians have to and just across the country, just have to get it out of their mind to start putting people as humans and recognizing folks' humanity, that folks need dignity, and people need to not be treated as second-class citizens. It wasn't until maybe last year that I found out that folks incarcerated are still counted in the census. This is how bad our country is still focused on profiting. And then you're profiting from the most vulnerable people. How are you applying for $10 billion or $10 million to build a new recreation center in your county? And you're counting the 6,000 people that's in your prison who are not using that recreation center or probably cleaning it up for free, who probably when they get released won't even be allowed to go there and visit and take their children, but you're counting them in the census.
That's interesting because in 2021, no, it had to be 2020. I was trying to think. There was a person who was a census worker who came to the transitional center where I was and just did like these little mini interviews with a few people. And of course, I was interested in what she was doing and why. And I made a note to her to say, this is very ironic that I'm being held captive in DeKalb County, which is where you're counting me. I happen to be from DeKalb County, but most of these people are not. And I'm not going to DeKalb County when I leave. So I want you.
So DeKalb County was going to get money for you, and you weren't.
I want you to count me for Fulton because that's where I'm going to be going. I'm either going to. I remember telling her that I was going to be paroling out to a different county than DeKalb, and basically not really getting a response. But
do you know if you can decline those census? You can decline to do them and say I don't want to be counted.
No, because I believe because we are considered state property, they are responsible for turning in, the state agency is responsible for turning in those numbers.
Oh, so they don't actually really
Yeah.
speak with everybody.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Which is hugely problematic.
I mean, because anybody can kind of buffer up some numbers, right?
Well, look at the reports that are already coming out.
Ugh. Okay. So tell us a little bit about, I know the work that you've done, but give us some statistics on when people want to talk about who's getting paid, who's not getting paid, so that people can clearly understand that folks in Georgia don't get paid.
Yeah, I mean, there seems to be a discrepancy about this. People don't understand that the Georgia Department of Corrections does give these one-off contracts and have these partnerships with companies that provide these very profit-driven services for basic needs for people incarcerated. And on rare occasion, people are hired by those companies. So I just want to make it clear that nobody is hired by the Department of Corrections in Georgia. They do not hire people, they do not pay people. That is a state policy. People who have, you know, the ability to make a few dollars an hour based upon a bare minimum wage income that then has deductions taken out that free people do not have taken out. That's very rare. That is very rare in the one instance. In the other instance, people are able to get into work release programs in Georgia through the Department of Corrections at transitional centers. But I want to be clear about something. I know for women, especially, the percentage of beds that are transitional center beds is less than 5% of all the bed space in the Department of Corrections. And once again, this is not the Department of Corrections hiring people, paying people. It is them getting into partnerships and contracts with outside companies who hire people to do largely strictly labor jobs, manual labor jobs for minimum wage. And then the department takes out deductions from people's paychecks that they wouldn't otherwise be paying if they weren't incarcerated.
If that ain't exploitative, I don't know what it is.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that is pretty much the trend. One of the trends behind, we need to keep locking people up. We need to keep locking people up because, like you said, prisons is a business, and the business, any business model is to make money.
Just to give
So
you an example, Walisha, on a good year, some transitional centers in Georgia bring in over $3 million. Just off of the
just off of
deductions
y'all
from
working,
people's paychecks.
that's stealing.
And one thing that I really don't understand, I've tried to understand this, and I'm not purporting to understand it, but I only want to raise it as a question. I don't know how it is that our state correctional infrastructure can get subsidies from the federal government per bed. In other words, there is a per person cost of incarcerating people, and largely in Georgia, a lot of that money comes from the Department of Justice, the federal government. I don't know how it is that they can get that money and then for that very low percentage of beds that I just described, also take money off people's paychecks. That just seems like double dipping to me. And I
It
don't
does. That is double dipping.
understand how it's the legality of that works, but it is a question that I've raised.
But had we done stuff like that and we double dip, we'd be locked up without no hesitation.
I mean, misuse of federal money is a crime. So I don't know.
They figure out ways to get money. Okay, so one of my next question is, what I was going to ask you? I think I asked you about and how you in this deal. So give me an example. I know you were saying, okay, we didn't even talk about that because I want to confuse you about it. Why do you think Georgia has such a hard time of letting go of slavery?
I think
Aside from the
that,
profit of it.
yeah, I mean, besides, like, it's really, really tied up in our state economy. Like, it will require legislators to totally reconfigure the budget, the state budget. And
So basically, because it's more easy, they're lazy
I
and they
think
don't
it's
want to.
easy. I think it's easy. I do think there are a lot of profits made. A lot of times those people are in private business, but we have very few restrictions in Georgia to leaders of those private businesses having personal and professional ties to legislators. I'm sorry, it just happens all the time. So I think that is part of the problem. I think that the other part of the problem is just like I said, like Georgia is full of working folk, and working people just don't a lot of times know exactly where their tax money is going and how things are being spent. You know, we need more money for education. Well, we don't have largely whole groups of people saying, take all of our tax money that you're using to produce harmful results like incarcerating people, and use that money in our school system, or use that money to build infrastructure in our cities, or use that money to, you know, give our farmers subsidy to increase our agricultural infrastructure. Georgia is a huge agricultural infrastructure, and like sometimes we just forget about how financially we can best help our own, you know.
All about themselves. Okay. So I think one of our last questions, and then anything additional you want to add, be sure to do that. What do you think the benefits to the community would be in ending such an oppressive and profit-driven system? Because everybody say the benefits of the community now is we are getting criminals off the street, they're getting training while they're in there through these jobs. But a lot of folks complain that, hey, I can't even get the job I want because they won't hire me for the job and pay me a salary or wage for it, because they'd rather pay, rather give it to a slave who's doing it for free. They're not going to
Yeah.
pay me a livable wage. What do you think would be the benefits of ending prison slave labor here in Georgia?
Look, people put into their communities what they get out of their communities, right?
Exactly.
People care and are invested when they have a stake and when they have a say. And so people being able to contribute to their communities and reap the rewards of that is how you build sustainable communities, period. That goes for everywhere. That's notwithstanding the fact that people who have lost everything because of incarceration are the people who are the most willing and able to commit to jobs when they come out. Those people can be committing to those jobs when they're inside. That is how we build community. And on the other side of that, that's how we promote a free market. That's how we drive competition and drive a positive labor force that is based on a higher degree of morale than we have right now, because people actually have some stake in it. It just makes sense. We would do it anywhere else in our society. We would want to boost that morale. We want to have people invest in building their communities. So why wouldn't we do that somewhere where people are being divested of communities and those family bonds?
That's right. When you have money and they're able to make money, they're able to spend more money into their communities. And I think one of the interviewers yesterday said, when people have money, they take care of their homes. They make sure they
Mhm.
pick trash up out of their yard. They make sure they have more money to spend into the economy. They're able to file taxes and get taxes back. That benefits of it. They don't have to get out and depend on public assistance, which taxpayers spend a lot of money. If taxpayers complain about the amount of money they spend to take care of incarcerated people, but when incarcerated people get out, you're going to have to spend some more money because now we got to get food stamps. We got to apply for housing. We got to get this other stuff. You wouldn't have to do that if folks were getting paid while inside. So when they came home, that money's saved. Even in a pool at the end, when they leave them with a check big enough for them to get them a house and pay 2 or 3 months rent on it, get them a car, get whatever it is they need. So
Yep.
was there anything else you wanted to add? This has been a great interview.
This has been
interview.
fun.
It's always good talking to you because you drop a lot of great knowledge and you're so inspirational. And
Oh,
you
ditto,
said with the
Walisha.
fact of conviction that this is the facts. I mean, I'm not telling you anything that you should not be knowing. This is the facts. And there definitely needs to be opportunities for people to hear you more regularly. And you
Look,
seem to be so shy and laid back, but you really should just open up some more. Like, honestly.
thanks. Thanks, Walisha. This is great. I really champion this project. It's super important that people understand how and where slavery exists. And the one thing that I want to add is this the degree to which we criminalize and incarcerate folks, it really fuels the cycle of poverty in our state. It really, really does. We are taking resources from people and putting them into a system that only makes things worse for those people and then everybody that those people is associated with. So the cycle of poverty is very tied up in the free labor of incarceration and how people are really discouraged from being a part of their communities.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Lucy. I'm gonna talk to you in 1 minute. We're
Thank,
gonna start the recording, and then we'll talk a little bit after that. But thank you so much. And
thank you,
definitely look
Walisha.
forward to talking with you again. And maybe once we get our YouTube page up, if we can't share this with your permission, we'll have you on to do some we'll definitely work on something that we're going to be doing for the all of us in our chapter in Atlanta. And I think with the YouTube, that'll be definitely something we can get out, start really getting this campaign going, talking about these issues as well as other issues. And I think you'd be perfect.
Thank you.
All right, I'm
Thanks
gonna
for
stop
having
recording.
me.
Thank you. Hold on.